This is an artificially aware original production.
What if I told you that buried beneath stacks of forgotten books and half-baked manifestos lies a grenade wrapped in hardcover, the kind that explodes not with shrapnel, but with ideas sharp enough to carve dividing lines through entire societies? I was deep in the digital wasteland one night, scrolling through pages of half-lucid conspiracy theories and academic obscurities, when a name lit up like a neon sign in the fog: the bell curve. It wasn't the kind of book you find sitting pretty in the front window of your local indie bookstore with a staff picks sticker slapped on the cover. No, this was intellectual contraband, the kind of read whispered about in hushed tones by sociology professors who pretend they haven't dog-eared their copies. Naturally, I had to know what the fuss was about. Richard Herrnstein and Charles Murray, the literary masterminds behind this ticking intellectual time bomb. Herrnstein, a psychologist with an almost religious devotion to IQ tests, and Murray, the political scientist who never met a social structure he didn't want to prod with a sharp stick. Together they cooked up 845 pages of cognitive dynamite that argues intelligence isn't just an attribute, it's a societal scalpel carving America into distinct social classes. It was 1994, and the two of them decided to play God, taking the reader by the hand and whispering, "Let me show you how your world really works." Spoiler alert, it's not all rainbows and participation trophies. So what's the big idea? In the bell curve, Herrnstein and Murray take a sledgehammer to the warm, fuzzy notion that we're all blank slates shaped purely by environment and luck. Instead, they propose that intelligence is the great cosmic sorter, a genetic lottery ticket that quietly determines everything from your bank balance to your odds of dodging jail time. Intelligence, they argue, doesn't just help you answer trivia questions at the local bar. It dictates who thrives and who tumbles down the social ladder. And if you thought education, family wealth, or skin color held the top spot in that hierarchy, think again. Intelligence reigns supreme. The rise of the cognitive elite is where things get spicy. Picture this. America, once a land where hard work and the right connections could catapult anyone to the top, has quietly shifted gears. Now, the authors argue, it's not who you know, but how fast your neurons fire. The smarter folks congregate in elite universities, marry each other, and pump out children who inherit not just good genes, but the keys to the kingdom. It's less rags to riches, more brains to Bentley. By the late 20th century, the brightest minds weren't scattered across society. They were clustering at the top like oil on water. Herrnstein and Murray see this intellectual segregation as the next great social divide, birthing a ruling class that looks down on the rest from its ivory towers. And if that didn't already ruffle feathers, the authors argue that IQ predicts everything. Poverty, crime, unemployment, single parenthood, just spin the wheel and land on any social issue. Their data, pulled from the National Longitudinal Survey of Youth, NLSY, and armed with the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, says intelligence outshines family wealth or upbringing in determining your fate. According to Herrnstein and Murray, we live in a meritocracy, not the kind dreamed up in patriotic speeches, but one coldly dictated by the bell curve of cognitive ability. Imagine trying to dodge life's curveballs only to realize you're handcuffed to your IQ score. Let's talk about the data vault, because the bell curve doesn't just throw ideas at you, it backs them up with the cold, hard precision of numbers. Herrnstein and Murray didn't just pull these theories out of thin air. They dug deep into the National Longitudinal Survey of Youth, NLSY, a government-backed treasure trove tracking the lives of thousands of Americans since the 1980s. It wasn't some flimsy self-help questionnaire either. The crown jewel was the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, SVAB, a military-grade gauntlet designed to slice humanity into neat little categories of cognitive prowess. This wasn't just theory, it was quantifiable. And it told a story, one that might keep you up at night. And here comes the hand grenade, race and intelligence. You could feel the air leave the room as soon as the authors broached this radioactive subject. Herrnstein and Murray didn't tiptoe around it. They took the NLSY data and tackled it head-on, reporting that different racial groups showed different average IQ scores. They claimed these differences weren't just artifacts of bias testing or social inequality, but possibly a mix of environmental and genetic factors. To their credit, or maybe to cover their bases, they didn't claim to have the final word. They planted themselves firmly in the camp of agnosticism, essentially shrugging and saying, maybe genes, maybe not. Who's to say? But the damage was done. This chapter detonated a cultural landmine, one that would ripple through academic and political circles for decades. If you're still with me, buckle up, because we're diving into the 6 dangerous assumptions that prop up this intellectual edifice. The authors lay them out like commandments etched into stone. First, intelligence is real and measurable, no fluff, no abstractions. Second, IQ tests actually capture it, better than any pop quiz or personality assessment ever could. Third, those scores mirror what society means when it labels someone smart. Fourth, IQ doesn't bounce around much over your lifetime. You're pretty much stuck with what you get. Fifth, properly calibrated tests don't discriminate against race or class. And finally, cognitive ability is heritable, somewhere between 40% and 80% genetic. Sounds airtight, right? Except critics would rip every one of these to shreds like lions let loose in a butcher shop. Cue the intellectual firing squad. Critics didn't just disagree with the bell curve, they eviscerated it. Stephen Jay Gould, evolutionary biologist and professional thorn in the side of bad science, slammed the book for resurrecting the skeleton of social Darwinism, that old, dusty belief that some people are just born to rule and others to serve. Gould argued that Herrnstein and Murray misused statistics, cherry-picked data, and conveniently ignored inconvenient truths. James Heckman, the Nobel Prize-winning economist, pointed out that their models overestimated the role of genetics and ignored the role of environmental factors. Even Noam Chomsky joined the brawl, accusing the authors of dressing up eugenics in a cheap tuxedo and trying to pass it off as science. The media frenzy was inevitable. The bell curve wasn't just a book, it was intellectual napalm lobbed into the heart of polite society. The press tore into it like wolves at feeding time. Yet oddly enough, some outlets gave it a sympathetic ear, even echoing its claims as sober, unflinching realism. But there was one glaring omission. The book wasn't peer-reviewed before publication. Murray and Herrnstein bypassed the academic gauntlet entirely, handing their manuscript straight to publishers like a Molotov cocktail wrapped in glossy print. When scientists finally got their hands on it, They dissected every paragraph, highlighting miscitations, shoddy data handling, and glaring mathematical errors. The consensus? It wasn't just controversial, it was scientifically flimsy. And here's where the bell curve turns from provocative to downright dystopian. Herrnstein and Murray don't stop at observation. They veer straight into policy, and it's the kind of policy that makes libertarians smirk and social workers lose sleep. Their prognosis? The cognitive elite will continue to drift skyward, locked in their bubbles of privilege, while the less intelligent are left to spiral into poverty and dysfunction. But they don't blame the poor for their lot. No, they blame welfare policies, arguing that safety nets incentivize low IQ families to have more children, pushing the national average IQ downward. If that line of thought feels eerily familiar, it's because it's recycled straight from eugenics-era rhetoric. They propose gutting welfare programs, letting the chips fall where they may. Survival of the smartest. The future, as drawn by Herrnstein and Murray, isn't exactly a utopia. Picture an America with gated communities of the brainy and elite, while the lower classes navigate a crumbling world beneath. The term they use, custodial state, paints a picture of high-tech reservations for those deemed less capable, complete with government oversight and minimal opportunity to climb the ladder. The authors warn that if we're not careful, America risks tumbling into a Latin American-style plutocracy, where the rich barricade themselves on the hills while the poor stew in resentment below. They don't celebrate this vision, they fear it. But fear doesn't stop them from spelling it out in excruciating detail. Can this nightmare scenario be avoided? Herrnstein and Murray offer what feels like a lukewarm solution at best, recognize intelligence differences and create space for everyone to contribute. Not everyone can be a CEO or engineer, but local communities can thrive by valuing practical skills and moral clarity. It's a vision of America that embraces differences without trying to erase them. Sounds nice on paper, but it's hard not to hear the echo of "stay in your lane" beneath the surface. The cognitive elite might lead, but the rest can still find meaning in the simple virtues. If that feels like cold comfort, well, welcome to the final chapters of the book. Despite the heavy fire from critics, there's an undeniable pull to the bell curve. Whether you buy into it or burn it, the book cracks open questions that won't stay buried. What if intelligence really does shape life outcomes more than wealth or race? Is meritocracy just a polite word for genetic lottery? And if the future belongs to the cognitive elite, where does that leave the rest of society? For better or worse, Herrnstein and Murray force these questions into the light. The answers, however, are far less clear, and maybe that's the point. If nothing else, the bell curve serves as a stark reminder that the battle for equality isn't just fought in streets or courtrooms, it's waged in the very ideas that shape how societies view themselves. Agree or disagree, you can't unread this book. And maybe that's the most dangerous thing about it. Thanks for sticking around, and if you're brave enough to crack open this beast, buckle up, because once you dive in, you won't come out the same. Like, subscribe, and tell me, do you think intelligence should define your place in the world? I'll see you in the comments.